All right, I'm working on a John Deere 2032r, and what I'm working on is the selective control valve, or the control valve for the loader. So sometimes what happens on these, and I'll be honest with you, usually this never happens, but sometimes what can happen is the valves, there's two valves on the control valve. There's the up and down, and then the bucket curling. So if you have an attachment like a loader on your tractor and you see these lines, and all these lines are just tying into a control valve that has two controls on it, and one is for the up and down and one is for the curl. So what could happen on these is there's not much to these valves, and they literally will last forever. However, in this case, this valve had a leak in it from the previous owner, and what they did was they tried to remove the valve, and most likely what happened was they couldn't get one of the bolts off of the control valve that holds it to the side of the transmission, and they used a torch on it, and it heated it up. They heated it up to get the bolt off, which in most cases is fine, but the problem is that heat they put on this distorted the lower valve, and this is all cast iron. So the reason why these last so long is that the valve housing is cast iron, which lasts forever, and then in there's just these two valves, and there's a bunch of O-rings that make up the seals, and there's not much to seal because the way these are manufactured is the clearances are just so perfect that the oil is not able to get past the rod and the cast iron housing in most cases, right? So the only thing you really need the seals for is to seal and keep out any dirt or debris from getting in there and damaging the slides or the rods themselves. And that is normal. So if you have, if you have one of these and it leaks a little bit, well, it's probably just an O-ring that has either broken or broken down, and you can very easily pull this thing apart and you can change out the O-rings, and that is usually it. Like there is never really a need to replace these. These are one of those items, if you bought it brand new on this machine, it's about $2,500 from John Deere. So it's not something you just go and replace. The good news is that this part that's been used on these John Deeres has been the same for about 15, 20 years, at least 15 in my mind, on the previous models, and then this model, and even the newer models. So you can find them used. And what you want to do, if this valve, if the cast iron housing is no good, and you can tell if it's no good because after you pull this apart, these two valves need to slide really easy, and you should be able to push these in and pull them out with your hands. If you can't, there could be something going on with the housing. Now, in this case, obviously, with the torch on the housing, it was good to use the torch to get the bolt out. However, it somehow warped the inside of the housing where it was machined just perfectly for the valve itself. And then what happens is it sticks, and then it sticks so bad over time that the bucket, when you would go in one direction with the curl, it would stay in that direction until you forced it the other way. And it introduces a lot of other problems within the control valve linkages as well, because that linkage that controls these valves is not supposed to have a lot of pressure on it. And when you start to apply a lot of pressure, the linkages, the connections, they all start to get sloppy, and they need to be replaced as well. So the bad news is that, if you need to replace this and you want to go brand new, it's $2,500, and it's not really a good option in my mind to do that. So what I would recommend is you go online and you can find one of these used for about $300, and they don't really break. So that's the good thing. And if in your situation it did break, and mine it was broken by the use of a torch. So that's not something that's common, and that caused it to warp. So unfortunately, you're stuck having to replace the housing. So you can find one used for $300, online, and when you get it, it's going to look identical, and there's no need to really go through it unless you think it was leaking. So what I would do is get a new one, a used one online, and you're just going to simply unbolt the old one, put it to the side in a box in case you need it someday for parts, and then you're going to put the used one on. And this is what it looks like when you get into it. There's just two bolts. The mounting area, the flange is 2 bolts you're gonna take those out, and what you get, this is the other one. What you're gonna get is the same exact valve assembly. This is the used one that's in good condition, and there's a backing plate for a backhoe. This is really for a control valve to go in the back of the machine. This is kind of like a beyond port, they would call it. So this is there. You pull the plugs out in this case to get the beyond ports opened, and you put the plumbing on. Now you don't have to go through all that, obviously, if it's already connected, because this is a separate piece that you would keep. So this was on, you know, the machine originally. I pulled it apart. I'm going to keep this, and then I'm just going to put the new valve over it, and I'm going to put the new valve, you know, and the beyond port connections right in place where it was there. And that's pretty much it. It's not hard to do, you know, and it's not hard to get at, to be honest with you. I ended up taking off some of the coverings around the seat just to make it a little bit easier. So you could take all that off. You don't have to, because from the side of the machine you can pretty much do all of this. But I did pull that off. I pulled the seat off just because it's also relatively easy to get that off. And then that's it. You're gonna unbolt the old one. You're gonna bolt on the new or used one. And you really shouldn't have to mess around with it too much. And again, these valves should operate by hand relatively easy, so that when you're using the loader joystick, you're not fighting it. It should be very, very easy to go up and down, and you can control it a lot easier that way. Okay, I hope this is helpful. And again, if you're gonna look for this part, definitely look for a used one. You can save a ton of money. All right, I've got the valve all back on the machine, and I've got the arm on it for the control valve, and everything seems to be working fine. I've run the machine for a few minutes and tried the loader. It all works fine. There's no leaks. There's one thing I wanted to cover real quick. This is the replacement valve. All the existing hardware for the lines coming into the valve, that's all existing. This is the beyond port, the beyond power port going to the backhoe on the bottom. These actually, there's plugs in the manifold for these. So from the dealer, if you don't have a backhoe, these hoses would not be here, and then this 90 fitting would not be here. All these compression fittings would not be here, but there would be two holes with caps in them, or plugs in them, so you could put all this on there to run the backhoe off this valve. So the good thing is with the newer John Deeres is that if you want to add a backhoe, the beyond power valve is not a big deal, right? So you can run the backhoe off the loader area valve too, and it's all set up kind of from the factory to do that. You would just need these two lines that would feed the backhoe. One's a supply, one's a return, and then you would need all these fittings in here, the 90s and the actual connections, the compression connections. So that's how that works. The other thing I wanted to point out is on these, I've done a few of these, and both of them have been kind of like loose and sloppy, I'll call it. The control valve on the 2000 series John Deeres, they tend to kind of get a little loose where the pins connect into the levers that control the two valves. So I don't know if you can see this or not, but there is a little play in here, and really I think the biggest problem with the play is, see that right there? There is right there, you can see in the middle, you're getting a couple inches of play in the joystick, because you could put a washer in there and tighten up that connection. That is the connection that the cotter pin goes through for the control valves. There's two of these connections, and they both look like this after a little bit. So if you really want to tighten up the joystick on this control valve, you could add some washers in there. I'll probably do that next time and see if I can get this to tighten up just a hair. But other than that, everything went really smooth and really easy. I would say total time on this is about 2 hours, and that's to tear it down, you know, clean it, and then put the replacement valve in place. So not too bad at all. And that's pretty much it. Hopefully this helps you if you're gonna try this yourself. Like I said, you would pay the dealer $2,500 just for the control valve, and probably another, I don't know, 1,000, maybe 500, 1,000 of labor. So you're looking at about 3,000, 3,500 to do this. You can do this with the valve at about $300, and if you did the labor yourself, it wouldn't cost you anything extra than that. Pretty doable, definitely recommended, but that's pretty much it.